Glava 1. The Invisible Throne. Every room has a throne, even when no one admits it. Sometimes it is a leather chair at the head of the table. Sometimes it is the silence after a difficult question. Sometimes it is the right to decide when the conversation is over. A strong position begins when a person, a group, or a state is not merely present, but recognized as someone whose presence changes the behavior of others. A weak position begins when one must constantly ask permission to be taken seriously. Long before offices, negotiations, job interviews, and online profiles, human beings understood position through distance from danger. The person closest to the fire, the chief sitting on the higher stone, the priest standing between the tribe and the gods, the messenger carrying a seal from a king, all of them occupied visible positions in an invisible order. Their strength was not only physical, it was symbolic. The group believed that their words had consequences. In ancient courts, position was staged with almost theatrical precision. In Egypt, Persia, China, Rome, and Byzantium, rulers turned architecture into rhetoric. The visitor walked through gates, corridors, guards, curtains, incense, gold, and delay before reaching the sovereign. By the time the conversation began, the strongest argument had already been made. You are not entering an ordinary room. You are entering my world. A strong position, then, is not simply confidence. It is the possession of options, legitimacy, information, timing, allies, and the ability to walk away. A weak position is not simply shyness. It is dependence, urgency, unclear status, lack of alternatives, fear of rejection, and the need to prove too much too quickly. The tragedy is that many people confuse volume with strength and politeness with weakness. The meaning of position is that every interaction begins before words. A candidate enters an interview. A student asks a teacher for a second chance. A founder pitches investors. A junior employee challenges a manager. A country sits at a peace table. Each scene has its visible script and hidden geometry. The wise person learns to read that geometry before speaking, because the first battle is not for victory, it is for the right to define the field. Glava 2. Before language, strength around the fire. The first strong position was probably not a crown, but a place near the fire. Fire gave warmth, food, light, and protection from animals, so distance from it meant more than comfort. It meant belonging. The stranger who approached the circle had to show that he was not a threat before he could become a guest. His body spoke before his mouth did. Anthropologists often describe early human life as a web of signals: open hands, lowered weapons, gifts, eye contact, posture, ritual greetings, shared food. These were not decorations of communication. They were its foundation. A person in a weak position had to reduce fear. A person in a strong position could set the terms of approach. The host decided how close the stranger could come. This ancient logic still survives in modern life. When someone joins a new company, enters a new class, visits a new family, or comes to a party where everyone already knows each other, they are once again near the edge of the fire. They watch who speaks freely, who interrupts, who is protected by jokes, and who must explain themselves carefully. The old tribe has become a meeting room, but the instinct remains. The earliest lesson of strong and weak position is therefore simple. Position is relational. A strong hunter can become weak in a foreign camp. A respected elder can become powerless before a conquering army. A wealthy investor can become confused in a room full of engineers who understand the product better than he does. Strength is never stored forever inside a person. It appears between people in a specific moment under specific rules. Glava 3. Kings, Messengers, and the Rhetoric of Distance. Ancient power loved distance. The king was not just another man with better clothes. He was made difficult to reach. In the Persian Empire, the royal court used protocol to create awe, and Greek writers describe the great king as a figure surrounded by ritual, servants, guards, and silence. The farther a ruler stood from ordinary access, the stronger his position appeared. Distance became a political instrument. Messengers lived in a stranger position. They were personally vulnerable, but symbolically protected. A herald could carry words that would be fatal if spoken as his own opinion, because he spoke under the shadow of another power. In Homeric and classical traditions, the messenger often arrived as a living bridge between enemies. His strength came not from the sword in his hand, but from the authority behind his voice. Rome understood this with terrifying clarity. Senators, generals, tribunes, patrons, clients, and citizens all existed inside a hierarchy of names, titles, privileges, and obligations. A Roman did not merely ask, "What do you say?" He asked, "Who are you to say it?" Cicero, one of history's great masters of rhetoric, built arguments not only from logic but from position. The dignity of the speaker, the character of the opponent, the memory of the republic, and the fear of disorder. One famous scene belongs to Julius Caesar, who crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE and turned a river into a sentence. Until that moment, geography held political meaning. A general entering Italy with an army was not merely traveling, he was breaking the grammar of the Roman state. Caesar's strong position came from soldiers, fame, speed, and audacity, but it also came from narrative. He presented his move not as ambition, but as necessity. The lesson is sharp. Strong position often depends on framing the action before others frame it for you. If you arrive late and say, "I failed," you stand in one world. If you say, "I made a trade-off because the priority changed," you stand in another. Rhetoric does not erase reality, but it arranges the doorway through which reality enters the room. Glava 4. Socrates and the power of the weak position. Socrates looked weak by many conventional standards. He was not rich, not beautiful by Athenian ideals, not an office holder, and not a commander surrounded by loyal troops. He walked through Athens asking questions that seemed innocent until they began to wound reputations. His method was quiet, almost barefoot, but it changed the position of everyone around him. The confident man who claimed wisdom often left looking uncertain. The strange power of Socrates came from voluntary weakness. He did not begin by declaring doctrine. He began by asking for help. What is justice? What is courage? What is virtue? The other person took the visible high ground by answering, but Socrates quietly controlled the path. He made the speaker build a tower, then removed one stone at a time. This is one of the oldest rhetorical reversals. The weak position can become strong when it controls the question. A junior employee may ask, "What result are we optimizing for?" A student may ask, "What would count as evidence?" A negotiator may ask, "Compared to which alternative?" The person asking may appear humble, but the question can move the entire battlefield. Athens eventually condemned Socrates in 399 BCE, accusing him of impiety and corrupting the youth. The event is often remembered as a tragedy of philosophy, but it is also a lesson in social dynamics. A man with no army threatened men with status because he changed the audience's perception of their strength. He showed that a position built only on reputation becomes fragile when exposed to disciplined questioning. Glava 5. Sun Tzu's strategy and the art of not needing to fight. In ancient China, strength was often imagined not as noise, but as configuration. Sun Tzu, traditionally associated with the art of war, wrote about victory before battle. The best commander did not merely win after chaos began. He arranged conditions so the enemy entered chaos already defeated. In this vision, strong position is not heroic shouting on a battlefield. It is terrain, timing, deception, supply, morale, and knowledge. The idea is mercilessly practical. An army on high ground has a different voice from an army trapped in mud. A general with food, rest, and local allies speaks differently from a general with hungry soldiers and fading loyalty. Even courage changes when the road behind you is closed. Strategy is the art of making psychology obey geography. In conversation, the same principle appears in smaller clothes. A person who prepares facts before a meeting stands on higher ground. A person who knows the budget, deadlines, risks, and decision makers has better terrain. A person who has another job offer, another supplier, another plan, or enough patience not to rush has strategic depth. The sentence may sound simple, but behind it stands an army of alternatives. Weak position often comes from entering battle too late. The employee asks for a raise only after resentment has grown. The founder searches for funding only when money is almost gone. The student asks for mercy only after the deadline has passed. The state negotiates only after its supply lines collapse. Urgency turns even a reasonable request into a plea. Sun Tzu's ghost still walks through boardrooms and messages. He whispers that strength is built before the dramatic scene. By the time people see the negotiation, most of the negotiation has already happened. The visible conversation is only the final bridge over a river that was measured long before dawn. Glava 6. The Courtier, Weakness, dressed as elegance. Renaissance courts were laboratories of position. In Italy, France, Spain, and England, ambitious men learned that survival near power required more than bravery. A courtier had to flatter without looking desperate, advise without insulting, compete without appearing crude, and withdraw without seeming defeated. Baldassare Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier, published in 1528, captured this world with polished cruelty. The ideal courtier had to make difficult skill look effortless. This effortless appearance was called sprezzatura. It meant graceful nonchalance, the art of hiding labor. A strong courtier did not sweat visibly for attention. He made the prince feel wise, the audience feel entertained, and rivals feel uncertain. His strength was not official power, but access. He lived near the source of decisions. Yet the courtier's position was also fragile. One rumor, one failed joke, one jealous favorite, one change in royal mood could destroy years of careful performance. The same man who looked powerful in the morning could be exiled by evening. The court taught a bitter truth. Borrowed strength must be managed carefully because borrowed light disappears when the candle moves. Modern offices have their courtiers. They are not always the highest-ranking people, but they know how decisions really move. They understand who influences whom, which topics are dangerous, when the leader wants challenge, and when the leader wants loyalty. Their position is strong because they read the room, but weak because it depends on access. They stand close to the throne, and that is both privilege and danger. Glava 7. Machiavelli and the Cold Anatomy of Position. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote during a violent Italian world of city-states, alliances, betrayals, mercenaries, popes, and foreign armies. Florence, Milan, Venice, Rome, Naples, France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire moved like knives under silk. In such a world, moral beauty did not guarantee survival. Machiavelli looked at power without perfume. That is why people still fear his name. The Prince is often read as a manual for cruelty, but its deeper subject is position under danger. A ruler must know whether he relies on his own arms or borrowed arms, on love or fear, on old institutions or new conquest, on fortune or skill. Machiavelli understood that weak position comes from dependence on forces one cannot command. A prince protected by mercenaries may look strong in a parade and collapse in a crisis. One of his most famous ideas is virtu, not virtue in the soft moral sense, but force, skill, audacity, adaptability, and command of circumstance. Fortune, he suggested, is like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes destructive. The strong leader builds dikes before the flood. The weak leader calls the flood unfair after it has already entered the city. In personal communication, Machiavelli's lesson does not require cynicism. It requires realism. When someone says they should respect me, the colder question is, what makes respect useful or necessary for them? When someone says they promised, the colder question is, what happens if they break the promise? Position improves when sentiment is supported by structure. The danger is that people imitate Machiavelli badly. They become theatrical manipulators, cruel in small ways, proud of being feared in rooms where cooperation is actually more valuable. True position is not constant aggression. A ruler who terrifies everyone may create obedience, but also conspiracy. Strength without legitimacy becomes a castle with cracks in every wall. Glava 8. Salons, coffeehouses, and the power of the conversational stage. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European salons and coffeehouses created new arenas of position. In Paris, London, Vienna, and other cities, conversation became a social technology. Aristocrats, writers, philosophers, scientists, diplomats, and ambitious outsiders met in rooms where wit could compete with birth. A person who could speak brilliantly might briefly outrank someone born above him. The tongue became a ladder. French salons, often hosted by influential women such as Madame de Rambouillet or later Madame Geoffroy, shaped intellectual life through invitation, taste, and conversation. The hostess held a subtle but powerful position. She might not command an army or sign laws, but she controlled access to the room where reputations were made. To be invited was to be recognized. To be excluded was to vanish from a certain world. Coffeehouses in London played a different but related role. They became places where merchants, journalists, political actors, and scientists exchanged information. Lloyd's of London, the famous insurance market, grew from Edward Lloyd's Coffee House, where shipping news mattered like gold. Information created position. The man who knew which ship had arrived, which war might begin, or which price was changing could speak with authority. Today, social media, group chats, conferences, co-working spaces, and private communities play similar roles. Some people hold position because they own capital, others because they own attention, others because they host the room, moderate the channel, curate the guest list, or understand the hidden trend before it becomes public language. The salon has not disappeared. It has become digital, faster, and less forgiving. Glava 9, the duel, the insult, and the fragility of honor. For centuries, honor cultures treated position as something that could be wounded in public. In Europe, duels became rituals for repairing damaged status among nobles, officers, politicians, and gentlemen. The insult mattered not only because of emotion, but because reputation was social currency. If a man accepted humiliation publicly, others might treat him as weak. A word could become a weapon because the audience made it one. The duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr in 1804 remains one of the most famous examples. Both men were major American political figures, and Burr believed Hamilton had damaged his honor through public and private remarks. The confrontation ended with Hamilton mortally wounded, and Burr's career permanently darkened. The duel was meant to restore position, but it destroyed it. Honor demanded theater, and theater demanded blood. This world seems distant, yet the mechanism survives. Online arguments often resemble symbolic duels. A sarcastic comment, a public accusation, a quote tweet, a workplace joke at someone's expense, each can become a challenge before an audience. The weak position is not always the insult itself, but the panic response after it. The person who overreacts may confirm the wound. Strong position under insult requires control of frame. One can ignore, clarify, joke, redirect, name the tactic, or move the conversation back to substance. The key is not to let the attacker decide the stage, the script, and the emotional temperature. In old duels, men fought because they believed silence meant defeat. In modern rhetoric, silence can be defeat, but it can also be command. The difference lies in whether the silence is chosen or forced. Glava 10, negotiation and the birth of alternatives. Modern negotiation theory gave a precise name to one of the oldest forms of strength, the alternative. In the 20th century, scholars and practitioners began to formalize what merchants, diplomats, and villagers had always known. The person with another path is not trapped. The person with no other path must ask the present road for mercy. Later, this became widely discussed through the idea of BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Diplomats understood this long before business schools gave it a neat acronym. At peace conferences, trade talks, and crisis meetings, each side asks not only, "What do we want?" but also, "What happens if we refuse?" The Congress of Vienna after Napoleon's defeat in 1815 was not merely a polite gathering of statesmen in elegant rooms. It was a grand choreography of position. Austria, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and France all tried to shape Europe while measuring armies, exhaustion, legitimacy, fear of revolution, and the balance of power. A curious detail of diplomacy is that parties often perform weakness and strength at the same time. A state may say, "We cannot accept this," not because it is helpless, but because refusal strengthens its bargaining line. A company may say, "Our budget is fixed," even when the budget has hidden flexibility. A candidate may say, "I am considering other opportunities," and suddenly the same resume shines with new light. Alternatives change perception. In everyday life, this is painfully visible. The person who needs immediate approval often explains too much. The person who can wait speaks less. The seller with many buyers does not chase. The buyer with many sellers does not beg. Strong position is often audible as calm because alternatives quiet the nervous system. Glava 11, the weak position as moral power. Not all weakness is defeat. History contains moments when visible weakness became moral force. Early Christians facing Roman authority, Gandhi walking to the sea during the Salt March in 1930, civil rights marchers crossing bridges and sitting at lunch counters, dissidents speaking before courts. These figures often lacked conventional power. They did not control the police, the army, or the treasury, yet they created a higher audience. Mahatma Gandhi understood position as theater with ethical pressure. When the British Empire held weapons and bureaucracy, Gandhi used discipline, visibility, suffering, and symbolic action. The Salt March turned a basic substance into a political symbol. By walking, he changed the frame. The empire no longer looked merely administrative. It looked absurdly powerful against ordinary people claiming salt. Weakness became a mirror. Martin Luther King Jr. and the American Civil Rights Movement used related dynamics. Nonviolent protest did not mean passivity. It was a strategy that forced hidden violence into public view. When peaceful demonstrators were attacked, the moral position shifted before national and international audiences. The state still had physical strength, but the protesters gained narrative strength. This is why weak position must be read carefully. A person may lack formal authority but hold moral legitimacy. A child asking a simple, honest question can embarrass adults. A junior employee pointing out a real ethical risk can become stronger than a manager protecting convenience. A customer with documented evidence can become stronger than a company hiding behind procedure. Moral position becomes powerful when the audience accepts its legitimacy. Glava 12. Corporations, brands, and the position of trust. In the industrial age, companies learned that position could be built not only by factories, but by trust. A brand is a promise repeated until it becomes familiar. Coca-Cola, Ford, IBM, Toyota, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and many others did not simply sell products. They created positions in the public imagination. The strongest companies became reference points. People compared newcomers to them, which meant the old names owned the standard. Henry Ford occupied a strong position not only because he made cars, but because he changed the logic of production. The moving assembly line at Highland Park helped turn the automobile from luxury object into mass product. Ford's position came from scale, price, process, and myth. The Model T was not only transportation, it was a sentence about modern life moving faster. Apple later mastered a different type of position, aesthetic authority. Under Steve Jobs, product launches became staged ceremonies. The speaker stood before a dark screen, turned simplicity into drama, and made the audience feel that technology was not machinery but destiny in the palm of a hand. This was rhetoric as industrial theater. The company's strength came not only from devices, but from controlling expectation. Yet corporate position is fragile when trust breaks. Volkswagen's emissions scandal, financial crises, privacy controversies, product failures, and public relations disasters all show how quickly symbolic strength can weaken. A brand may spend decades building a cathedral of confidence, then discover that one hidden compromise echoes through every stone. In modern markets, position is not what a company says it is what customers still believe after disappointment. Glava 13. Meetings, the small theater of everyday power. The meeting room is one of the most common modern stages of strong and weak position. The table may look neutral, but it rarely is. Someone called the meeting, someone prepared the agenda, someone controls the screen, someone has the data, someone has the boss's trust, and someone is there only to be informed after the real decision. The scene is polite, but the structure speaks. A strong position in a meeting often shows itself through brevity. The person who can say less and still be understood usually has recognized authority. They ask sharper questions, summarize options, define next steps, and do not chase every interruption. Their sentences land because the room expects them to matter. They do not need to decorate every statement with proof of their existence. A weak position often reveals itself through over-explanation. The person adds too many reasons, apologizes before disagreeing, laughs nervously after serious points, or offers discounts before hearing resistance. This does not mean they lack intelligence. It means their nervous system has detected risk. They are trying to buy safety with language. The cure is not fake dominance. It is preparation and structure. Enter with the issue, evidence, options, recommendation, and desired decision. Know who decides, who influences, who resists, and what risk each person sees. The stronger speaker does not merely speak better. They reduce the room's uncertainty. Clarity itself becomes authority. A small comic truth belongs here. Many meetings are won by the person who writes the summary afterward. The official conversation may have been chaotic, but the written recap becomes the memory of the group. Whoever phrases the decision often shapes the decision. The minutes are sometimes mightier than the speech. Glava 14. Weak signals. How position reveals itself. Position rarely announces itself honestly. It leaks through small signals. Who waits for whom? Who interrupts without punishment? Who can say no without giving a long explanation? Who receives immediate replies and who must send reminders? Who makes jokes about others and who becomes careful when joked about? These details reveal the weather of power. In a strong position, people usually have more room for imperfection. Their late arrival is called a packed schedule. Their bluntness is called honesty. Their silence is called thoughtfulness. Their change of mind is called strategic adaptation. The same behavior from a weak position may be judged as irresponsibility, rudeness, emptiness, or inconsistency. Position changes interpretation. This is one of the cruelest facts of social dynamics. People often believe they are being judged only by behavior, but behavior enters the court already carrying the speaker's status. A senior expert says, "This won't work," and the room pauses. A newcomer says the same thing and the room asks for proof. The sentence is identical, but the speaker is not. Recognizing this should not lead to bitterness. It should lead to strategy. If your position is weak, do not rely only on forceful tone. Build evidence, allies, timing, credibility, and small wins. If your position is strong, do not confuse favorable interpretation with personal genius. The room may be giving you credit that someone else would have to earn under heavier gravity. Glava 15. Digital status and the new court of attention. The internet created a new court where followers, likes, views, comments, screenshots, and algorithms became symbols of position. A teenager with a phone can sometimes command more attention than a professor with a library. A small account can become powerful for 1 week if the right story catches fire. A company can lose control of its image before its official statement is even drafted. Attention became a volatile throne. Influencers understand position as visibility plus trust plus repetition. Their strength does not come only from beauty, expertise, or entertainment. It comes from the fact that people return. The audience begins to treat the creator as a familiar voice, almost a companion, sometimes even an authority in areas far beyond their competence. This is why digital position is both powerful and dangerous. Familiarity can imitate wisdom. Platforms change the signs of weakness too. Desperate posting, defensive replies, constant justification, buying fake engagement, attacking every critic, and chasing trends without identity can make a person look weaker. Online, as in old courts, hunger for approval has a smell. The audience may not name it, but it senses it. A strong digital position requires consistency of frame. Modern public crises show this vividly. When a brand, celebrity, politician, or creator faces backlash, the first response often matters more than the original mistake. A calm admission can preserve position. A defensive spiral can destroy it. A delayed silence can look arrogant, but a rushed statement can look panicked. The old art of court survival has returned through screens, only now the king is the crowd and the crowd never sleeps. Glava 16. The ethics of strength. The final meaning of strong position is not domination. A person can win every argument and still become poor in trust. A manager can silence a team and still destroy intelligence. A speaker can humiliate opponents and still train the room to fear honesty. Strength without ethics becomes predation, and predation eventually produces resistance. The best strong position creates order around it. It allows truth to be spoken without chaos. It protects the weaker side from unnecessary humiliation. It uses clarity instead of intimidation whenever possible. This is why the greatest leaders are not only feared or admired, they make others more capable. Their strength becomes architecture, not a cage. A weak position also has dignity when handled consciously. It can learn, observe, gather allies, ask precise questions, document reality, and choose the right moment. Weakness becomes dangerous only when it turns into resentment without strategy or submission without thought. Many strong positions began as weak positions that studied the room carefully. Every throne was once a chair someone learned how to approach. In the end, strong and weak position are not fixed identities. They are weather systems moving through human life. At breakfast, at work, in love, in politics, in business, in a comment thread, in a court, in a classroom, the same question returns. Who has options? Who has legitimacy? Who controls the frame? Who needs too much and who can wait? To understand this is to see the hidden stage beneath ordinary speech. And once the stage is visible, every conversation becomes less random, less frightening, and more human.